Hello and welcome to Supernatural Myths and Legends. My name is Connor Wolf, and over the course of this season of Supernatural, we will be taking a close look into some of the most popular and most feared paranormal entities of the 21st century. Today we'll be looking at one of the darkest creatures of the night, the vampire. Before we begin, I would like to thank everyone for listening, and I hope you all enjoy. When you think of vampires, what comes to mind? I don't think I'll be alone in believing it to be a group of well-dressed men and women with pale faces and an insatiable thirst for human blood. There are, however, more than 200 different types of vampire or vampire-like creatures found in folklore all around the world. Unfortunately, I won't be going through every one of them. Instead, I'll dedicate an episode to the main ones we hear about. If you know of any myths or legends that you would love to hear about, hit the subscribe button and leave a comment. Now, without further ado, let us begin. Today I'll be talking about a type of vampire that is arguably one of the most famous, or at least most well recognised types of vampire, and that is the type written about by legendary author Bram Stoker. That's right, I bring you the Draculian vampire. Draculian vampirism is a term used to describe vampires who have come to exist in the same way that Count Vladimir Dracula did. Dracula himself is rumoured to be based on the infamous ruler of Wallachia, Vlad Tepes, more commonly known as Vlad the Impaler. There is a lot of speculation regarding whether or not Stoker's novel is based on sheer fantasy, or if there is some legendary truth behind the story. There are some who believe that Bram Stoker himself was either a vampire or perhaps a vampire hunter. According to legend, Count Dracula was one of 10 students at the mythical academy of Scholomance. The academy is said to be a school of black magic, led by the devil himself. The Academy of Scholomance taught its students the art of magic and the language of all living things. Each student would be chosen and would spend 7 years unexposed to sunlight in the underground school. At the end of their studies, each student would write their knowledge into the Solomon's book, and one of them would be chosen by the devil to become the weather maker, the one who would ride atop a dragon and control the weather on Earth. It is unclear as to whether or not Dracula himself was chosen for this role. However, I do not believe that he was. I believe that the students not chosen for this role, or at least some of them, are given the gift or curse of vampirism. Although it is my belief it is based mostly on speculation on my part due to insufficient evidence on this theory, it should be noted that Dracula's surname means son of the dragon. However, more likely than theory, this is due to his membership to the militant order of the dragon. Most Draculian vampires were nobles or people of great influence in their community, and those who did not possess these traits had an eternity of time to gain the wealth and power expected of them. These vampires include the likes of Count Dracula, Countess Elizabeth Bathory, the Alnwick Castle vampire, the Gorbals vampire, and some even speculate that the famous Russian mystic Grigory Rasputin was a vampire himself. Draculian vampires are known for having a number of these traits: a taste for blood of the opposite sex, being born into or finding their way into aristocracy, having hypnotic abilities, having an aversion to sunlight, having extensive knowledge of black magic, and all of them are rumoured to have affiliations with the devil. Our first suspect of vampirism comes from an old story of a merciless killer in Hungary, Countess Elizabeth Bathory. Born as a Hungarian noblewoman in the late 16th to early 17th century, Bathory is remembered by many as the most prolific female murderer to ever have lived, or died depending on what you believe. Through her mother, Bathory was the niece of Hungarian noble Stephen Bathory of the Somlyo branch, who was another voivode or king of Transylvania. Her brother was also a man of the same name, Stephen Bathory, who became a judge royal of Hungary. It is important to note that Transylvania was neighbour to Wallachia. Bathory herself is the great niece of Vlad Tepes III, or Vlad Dracula. Bathory is ironically famous for killing and bathing in the blood of hundreds of young virgin women in order to stay young, much like Dracula had to consume the blood of his victims to remain young. She was eventually caught and imprisoned until her death 4 years later. Our next vampiric suspect brings us back to the country of origin of Bram Stoker's novel, Britain. The Alnwick Castle vampire was once a powerful lord in Alnwick Castle in Northumberland until he met his untimely demise. The lord's death was not the end, however. Years after his passing, people in the area began to die in mysterious ways, their corpses drained of blood. The local priest was furious and gathered the townsfolk together and formed a mob. They took to the streets and ransacked the local cemetery until they came to the tomb of the old lord. They prized the tomb open, and as legend tells, inside lay bones and bits of flesh as well as his mysteriously well-preserved corpse. They proceeded to stab the dead nobleman, and even though he had been dead for decades, warm blood is said to have gushed from his body and served as evidence of his unholy, unnatural, and insatiable thirst. There are some who, to this day, still believe the demonic spirit of this lord still haunts the castle and its grounds in search of a new victim. Next, we head to Scotland in search of a vampiric tale that will chill you to your core. Today, the Gorbals area in Scotland is considered as just another part of the bustling metropolis that is Glasgow. In 1872, however, it was a small village designed in a Parisian diamond style with a fountain in the centre. This is the era in which the Gorbals vampire of unknown sex is supposed to have lived. The vampire was once an influential member of the community, and although there are no confirmed details of this creature of the night, at some point or another the man or woman died or was killed and buried in the southern necropolis, Glasgow's massive cemetery which houses hundreds of corpses. In the 1950s, children in the Gorbals started going missing, and nobody knew where to turn or who was to blame for these mysterious disappearances. During this period, many children took to the graveyard as a play area where they could run freely and play. It was only when the children began to disappear from this area that rumours began to spread. The Night Stalker was said to be around 7 foot tall, with iron-like fangs, who would wait until after dark to catch the stragglers who felt brave or adventurous enough to prowl the cemetery in the dark. Although many people set out to hunt this beast, they were unsuccessful due to the sheer size of the necropolis, and some even believed that the vampire lurked the streets at night, carefully picking its victims and hiding their lifeless bodies in the River Clyde. Even today, the rumours are still ripe and cause fear among many due to the recent eruption of missing people being found either in the river or mutilated in parks or woodland areas or near Glasgow. Whether there is any truth to this myth yet remains to be seen. Our next suspect lived in Russia, and this is where our story begins. Some people believe Grigory Rasputin was a man that could instill within you a multitude of feelings: fear, lust, anger, helplessness, fascination, and confusion. Rasputin was born a peasant in Siberia in the mid-1900s. After a pilgrimage to a monastery in 1897, Rasputin changed greatly, becoming a self-proclaimed wandering holy man and mystic. Those closest to him immediately saw the change. He seemed wiser, more powerful, and frightening than ever before. Not much is known of Rasputin's early life, and one can only speculate as to how a man like this grew up. One of Rasputin's most famous traits were his eyes, which were described as hypnotic, and if you look at photos of the man, you can still see the deep look of what can only be described as sheer vehemence. Rasputin's rise to power came when the wife of Tsar Nicholas II, the last monarch of Russia, called Rasputin to their palace to heal their haemophilic son, Alexei. Rasputin seemed to be the only person in all of Russia who could stop the boy from bleeding and ease his pain, making Rasputin an invaluable asset to the monarchy. Over the course of the next few years, many rumours spread about Rasputin, claiming that the Tsar allowed him to sleep with his wife, Alexandra. It was also believed that Rasputin was a worshipper of the devil and spent his nights in the company of the wives of many Russian nobles. It all came to a head when a group of these Russian nobles overheard that Rasputin was supposedly influencing Tsar Nicholas II and his wife to the point where he himself was the secret ruler of Russia. Unfortunately, this is just speculation. However, a group of nobles led by Prince Felix Yusupov, the Grand Duke Dmitry Pavlovich, and the right-wing politician Vladimir Poroshkevich concocted a plan to kill Rasputin in December 1916 by luring Rasputin to Yusupov's Moika Palace. It was there that they fed Rasputin poisoned food and wine. Rasputin ate deeply and stood up, telling the men that he felt just fine. He was then shot in the chest. When he fell to the ground, the conspirators donned his coat and hat and left so as to make it look to all those outside that Rasputin had left in perfect health. Upon returning to the palace, they found his body in the basement, and when they approached it, Rasputin is said to have jumped up and attacked one of the conspirators before escaping into the palace courtyard, where he was shot multiple times in the chest and then in the head before being savagely beaten. His body was then thrown into the Malaya Nevka River, although there is much controversy over to whether or not Rasputin was alive when he was thrown into the river. Before his death, Rasputin wrote about his own death and the fall of the Romanov dynasty. As a result of it, both of these predictions came to pass in time. Many believe that Rasputin did indeed come back from the dead as a vampire after making a deal with Satan in life. This is believed to be the reason that his funeral was only attended by the royal family, who were said to have been enthralled or hypnotized into serving him. Years following his death and the fall of the Romanov dynasty, Rasputin's body was exhumed and burned. The official story for this is so that his grave would not become a shrine or rallying point to his followers. As legend tells, one of the only ways to kill a vampire is to shoot them with a blessed bullet and burn the corpse. Unfortunately, we have reached the end of this episode of Supernatural, but if you want to hear more myths and legends, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. Stay safe, and remember, if you're greeted in the night by a stranger with a pallid look and a hypnotic gaze, you may well be talking to one of the most dangerous hunters of the night, the vampire.